Hi everyone, Ted Simpson here, doing the last painting of 2024. Let's get crazy, right? 18 by 24 canvas. Now this one was a little weird. Somehow along the way it got some stain on it. I don't know what I was thinking here. It had some liquid white on it, and before it dried, I decided, hey, I'll just paint it black gesso and make it a black canvas. Well, it's smeared with the liquid white. I wiped it off as best I could, but it left a stain. Cut 2-3 months later. Here it is now, completely dry, of course. So I covered it with a thin layer of the liquid white, and I'm going to see if this is going to work. It may not. So what are we doing today? I thought here for the last painting of the year, I would go back to the beginning and do the first painting I ever did in the Bob Ross method, which is Bob's Mountain Summit. It's a painting that came in the Bob Ross Master Kit, and back in the day there, you could get the Master Kit, and it would come with either a VHS cassette, remember those, or later on, it would come with a DVD. This one here, I just pulled this out of a really old Master Kit, and I'm not sure which one it was, but it also came with written instructions, like I do believe they do today. So here we go. You can see here I'm applying a layer of phthalo blue mixed with a little bit of midnight black, working it into the canvas here, back and forth, crisscross, little X's, and right off the bat that's going to cover up some of that black stain there. So picking up a little bit of that blue and then adding a little black to it, tap it, wipe it in, tap it. Bob kind of does both here. And we're looking for it to be a little darker up here in the corners. A little darker over on that side even. And as I work my way down, every time you do this, things get a little one shade deeper in value. I'm not going to worry about any lingering brush marks. You know, we'll go through our blending step here in a little bit. Already that covered up a lot of that blue or black gesso area there. Now I'm picking up a little bit of that blue and black, and let's put in an indication of some water here, pulling across from the outside in. Every time you do this, I've done this composition a number of times here. Every time you do it, you find out something different. You do something a little different. You figure out what works, what doesn't work. So the next time you do it, you can change things. You can also change things by putting it at another time of day, different season. Sometimes I just like to go right back and see from whence I came. This composition here, so often it's people's first Bob Ross composition, and it can be a struggle. First time you try anything, it's going to be a little bit different, you know. So I'm wiping off some of the excess paint. You could go and clean the brush if you want to in the paint thinner. I don't think it's all that necessary. And starting in the middle here, I'm just going to give everything a quick once over again. Crisscross X strokes, keeping the brush moving, softening that color, that liquid white. It's doing the job here at mixing and blending, leaving some light areas, or dark areas if you want to call them that. If you like it, leave it. There we go. And got a couple extra bristles there. They wanted to stay, but I don't want them there. So we'll get rid of those, and by pulling across down here in the water, I think my table has a little bit of a wobble to it. There we go. That's a little more steady. Pull some of that paint across the water. You can see it pulls across in the middle, but still leaves it a little lighter. That's what gives us our little sun zinger. But that, black stain there, I think that's going to wreak a little havoc. Might have to really alter the painting to cover that up. That's all right. This is just a practice, and hopefully here it's just a fun little indication for you to see what we can do. And here we go. Now, I'm going to come back here. I think Bob just used the 2-inch brush for this. I'm going to use the 1-inch brush because I want to. And we do have the standard Master Kit colors here. Titanium White, Alizarin Crimson, Phthalo Blue, Midnight Black, Van Dyke Brown, Sap Green, Cad Yellow, Bright Red. And Bob really goes all out with this. He loads up this brush, a 2-inch brush even. I'm going to load up the 1-inch brush here. Lots and lots of color. Look at that. If I tap it, look how much texture is there. There we go. So, let's come in here and let's spin some cloud. Little movements here, just pushing that paint off. You see that? Just pushing that paint off. Getting that color off and trying not to over stir it. Okay? Now I will take a mostly clean, dry 2-inch brush here, and you just tickle it, blend out the bottom, and then we give it our fluff, our hypnotizings. Anytime you pick up a little extra paint, you can just knock it off. You can wipe it off on a paper towel or an old rag. You don't have to beat the devil out of it. It is fun though. Just trying to soften those clouds a little bit. I say, something that Bob used to do, if it works, let's add another one. Don't fiddle around with the same one. Let's make a new one. First step is just sort of winding that brush around here and putting out an interesting shape. Trying not to overwork it. And I just sort of moved right into the blending stages. Leave that top edge alone. You don't really want to blend that all away at the top, it'll look a little flat. So we just blend out the bottom, leave that bright chunky stuff where it is. There we go. Now, I could put more. You could put as many clouds as you like here. A lot of this is just going to get covered up anyway, so let's not even worry about it. Okay, now, the infamous Bob Mountain Mix. Okay, he takes, a nice chunk of crimson, enough phthalo blue, it's not very much, a little bit of phthalo blue to make a purple color. Now, I just used a lot of crimson. We're going to use this again a little later on and throughout the painting here. Now let's add a nice lump of the Midnight Black and a touch of the Van Dyke Brown. Now they do make a mountain mix color that puts all these flavors right into a tube so you don't have to mix them. But you got this Master Kit, we're gonna use it to its fullest here. Let's cut off, touch and pull. Oh, and there goes the dog. So we get our little roll of paint. And depending on the size roll of paint, depending on the mountain, what size canvas you're using, it'll change things up. Oh yes, the hound is hounding at the moment. So we want this maybe a little bit off sides here. Maybe right in the middle, maybe a little bit off center. And wherever you want to put it, that's where it should go. And I'm focused here on just pushing that paint right into the fabric, making that nice clean outside line. That's what I'm focused on. And just draw out a basic shape here, and I'm scraping off the excess paint. I think the dog thinks I might be out as well as the rest of the family, and she's reacting to the noise of me talking. Maybe there's little lumps and bumps here. Don't know how many peaks we have quite yet. We don't have to decide right now. We could change things, make one a little taller, a little pointier, a little flatter, a little rounded. It's really up to you. We don't have to decide right off the bat. Pushing some paint in and then nicking off the rest. Just want some of that excess paint scraped off. Don't want a ton of it on there. A little is more than enough. So I tell you what, I am going to go ahead and clean this brush out. I've got my bucket, got my screen. Tappa, tappa, tappa. Really rinse that brush out. Shake it a couple of times and get your beater bucket. And just to be on the safe side here, I wipe some on a paper towel too. Push in, pull down and away. And I'm just using that paint that I pick up in that first stroke. See how it just moves it right down to the middle. And it stays a little lighter at the middle if you do this, briefly, promptly. One thing that always gets you, especially when you're new, is overworking. Whatever you're doing, it's just going over it too many times, thinking you gotta, quote, fix it. It's probably okay. The first time you push this brush out, it's all it needs to be. Look at that. We've got the paint in there already. Just trying to fill out a basic shape. And we want it lighter at the bottom, darker at the top. So the more you keep coming down here and then going back up, the lighter it keeps getting. We want to try to avoid that lightening effect. And trying here to pull some of that peak to the right, some of that peak to the left. There we go. And just like that, we've got a basic shape here. I'm going to soften the bottom edge of this mountain. A couple of crisscross strokes. Doesn't that already look misty? Foggy? I like it. A couple of spots here, just got to get. There we go. Ooh, I might have changed the top there. All right. Using a bit of that titanium white, we're going to create our highlights. Nice roll of paint here. Gotta have that light touch. We cannot push inwards. We just want to let that paint fall off the knife. And whenever I reload my knife, you wipe it clean first, get a sense, get a nice roll of paint. It just helps. It just helps keep you consistent here. Just lightly touch and let that paint just float off. That way, you get all these little breaks and holes, nooks and crannies, just like my English muffin. See how light I'm touching that? Just grazing it. And as you run out of paint, you can lower the angle a little bit or just wipe it off and reload. Now every couple of years I like to, not even a couple of years, every year at least, I do this particular composition just to get right back to my roots here, to get back to the basics and see where I progress. Now we got to mix up a nice batch here of a shadow color. So I'll take a little bit of that white, a little bit of that phthalo blue, maybe even a touch of the background color. And let's make up a batch of a shadowy color. A little darker, a little bluer, a touch of the black maybe to match the sky. I don't know, but we're looking for a nice marbly mix. Cut off our roll of paint. Maybe I'll use the backside here and just use the small edge of my knife to start out this little shadowed peak here. Then I can use the roll of paint on the long side of the knife and I can get out a little bit more here. Once again, the overworking is what will bug you. Get some of that out there. Don't try to blend too much there. Get some color on. Move on. Each of these little peaks here have to have a highlight side and a shadow side. Now this one here I think is a little too small, a little too narrow for that long edge of my knife, so I just use the small edge to get something started here. Then on this longer part, yeah, I can use the long edge there. Once you get the bulk of that shadow out there, I like to come back with the highlight color again and change up this line a little bit. And if the first time doesn't work, well, let's just lay it on there a little thicker. Cover up that color. Now you see that line is a little less just straight. But anytime you add a new highlight, this new little ridge here, let's give it its own little shadow. See that? Automatically looks a little more three-dimensional, doesn't it? Maybe a little more right here. I want to really try to spread what's already there. If you're thinking something needs changing, add a little more to your knife. Now, let's see here. A little tough spot to get up in there. That short edge of your knife, that's your good friend in this situation here. Maybe let's change this one. Let's have this peak come out a little bit more. And don't forget to give that own little shadow there. There we go. A little bit of fun. I like it. Let's keep messing with it. I think down here, maybe it goes into the mist a little too soon. So let's juice it up with a little more highlight there. A little thicker. Just laying it on. There, it gives it a little more prominence, doesn't it? I like it a little craggier. Maybe even a little more right here. Gonna find that angle and just lay it on. And as we need to here, we'll pick out some new shadows here wherever they might need to go. A couple of spots here and there. It's a fun little mountain. Let's play around here and let's clean up the bottom here by tapping in and sweeping up. Tapping and sweeping, creating a little blur, a little mist and fog there. And got to do a little bit on the shadow side too, just so you can see some blur. That's all that it really needs to be. Sometimes doing this actually grows your mountain. If you wanted to bring it down, you can increase the size of your mountain just by making more mist at the bottom. It really hides that whole shape, depending on how much you mess around with it. There we go. Nice little mountain there. So, all that mountain mix that we created, that mountain background color, we're going to use it throughout the rest of the painting here. So let's get a little bit of that shadow color scraped up. I don't want any white in this mix, so I just lightly buff it, get that excess out of there, and let's see what we got here. I tell you what, let's use the rest of my crimson, the rest of that phthalo blue, good hunk of black, good hunk of brown, and a nice hunk of green. And let's make a big old pile of color. I wasn't kidding when I said a big pile. And I got a little bit more to go. If I need more, I certainly have enough. So, now in this example here, look what he says, mixture of midnight black, blue, brown, crimson, and green. Now I think he's talking here about the next thing here, which does require a brush to be clean again. And I just knocked my reference photo right off my easel. Now if I can remember, at the end here I'll show you the pics that I'm working off of here, and if I've got it here somewhere, I think it's over there, my very, 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 very first painting. Now, I'm going to take, this brush has seen some action. I'm going to take a little bit of that color here, pull some down here, get some worked up in there. Oh, this brush is stiff. And let's create, got to create a little of this midground here. Might need a little more paint. Tapping in there, just so we can see something. Some land already growing there, huh? Now, a little more paint on the brush will make it up here darker, won't it? So, now that I have a layout here, I'm just going to add a little more. And with that same paint on my brush, let's just grab the bottom and pull down. Get our start of our reflections. There we go. I'm going to wipe off some of the excess paint and very lightly graze over. I tell you what, I still had too much paint. So either clean your brush, grab a new brush. Let's soften it down a little bit more. There we go. Very, very light, sideways. And look at that, we got a nice reflection in the water. Like it. Now, If I were to just hold my brush a little bit above center and push in, you can create some little grassy effects back there. Break up that top edge a little bit. Now, before we highlight that, let's throw in a little bit of background trees. I've got my fan brush at the ready. Lots of this dark color pulled into that fan brush. And we'll make some trees here, a little cluster of evergreens off here in the background. Just looking for some basic shapes there, basic cones. I remember doing this on my very first painting. I was using something like a 10-inch canvas or something like that, 11 by 14 maybe. It was just too small. Trying to make these bristles bend for such a small tree because of a small canvas, it was kind of working against me. Having a bigger canvas here sometimes makes it easier. So we got a few trees to make here. However many you want to make in your scene is up to you. Just some little taps, let the bristles kind of bend on the brush. Don't think we need too many more. I want one bigger one here. Kind of taking over. There we go. Nice. Now I'm going to save that brush, not clean it out. I'm going to use a clean brush here and create a little bit of a highlight. But before I do that, let's take our knife and vertical this time and just scratch in some little sticks and twigs here. Off in the background, here or there. Something like that. Something only people coming way up to the canvas might be able to see, you know? Now taking a little bit of the liquid white, I'm going to thin down some of my cadmium yellow and add a nice bit of the sap green here. How much sap green? It's up to you. How dark do you want it? How dull do you want it? Add a little of your dark color there. That really dulls it down pretty quick. And let's create some grass here. Just tapping, working my way towards the water. Putting in a layer of highlights here. If you want it more grassy, push up. Let's give that a try. There, I like that. As I'm running out of paint, it automatically gets darker. If it starts getting darker, you just push a little harder and that bright color comes right off the brush again. That's how you can play around here and get highlights and shadows, lights and darks in your painting, is just with different strength of pushing on the brush. Maybe a little more here. Ooh, give it a little oomph. I don't even know if we'll see some of this over here, but we're going to highlight it. Creating layers here, planes. Little lower. I'll come right down to the water's edge pretty much. Right where the land ends and the reflection begins. You can always come back here and clean up your line if you went a little too much into the water. Just grab it and turn it into reflections. Figure out what's working for you. There we go. Now, If I were to take some of that same color here, let's brighten it up just a little bit, just to have a little different flavor. Maybe a couple of spots on your trees, here and there, just a couple little highlights hitting it. That's it. Looks like we got something. Now, taking my knife, a speck of the liquid white mashed into some of that titanium white, and maybe just a speck of black, just so it's a little off-white. You could use brown or whatever else you want there. But I'm going to load up a very small amount right on the edge of the knife, touch and saw, create a little water line. Touch and saw, keep that knife always horizontal. You can lower the knife as I'm doing here, as I'm moving my way across. I'm changing the plane. Just gives you a sense of movement there. One spot here needs a little more. Now, if you overdo this, which is common, if you clean off your knife, just go in with a plain, clean knife and come right over that spot and just rub it. You can kind of dull things out, get some of that to disappear. You can even add a little water line in the water there, a little ripple there. Again, too strong, just rub. Watch it just dull and disappear. There you go. All right, so I'm going to come back here to our dark brush full of that dark shadowy tree color. Let's make some more trees, right? Just need a little indication here of a tree. Maybe a little taller, yoink. Getting something started here. Tapping and moving from the center out. Building this tree out one brushful at a time here. Want it nice and dark. So, especially going across anything that you've done previously, you want to make sure your brush is loaded. And you may need to reload that brush several times for every tree. Now, just down here past the water, that's all it really needs to be. Why fiddle around with it so much when you could just make more? You want to play around, make more trees. Don't fiddle with that same tree over and over. This tree just kind of mixes and merges in with the previous tree. We don't know which one's in front. We don't have to worry about that right now. Ooh, don't want to ruin those trees in the background. Maybe I'll put this one right over to the side here. Really help that depth and distance, seeing a nice dark tree right in front of the background tree. There we go. And then we've got, oh, dropping brushes. Then we've got our dirty old brush here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of that color and push up. Just putting in some some leafy trees. Right down on the side. And make that a little rounded. There we go. And maybe there's going to be all sorts of stuff down here in front. Some bushes and grasses. Something like that. And again, to help that sense of depth and distance. Do you see how I push this up here? As I move to the left, I lowered a little bit and pushed up, lowered a little bit and pushed up. Already, it doesn't just look like a flat plane. This one almost does. I changed it a little bit. This one is a little more distinct. so it doesn't look flat. That's one thing I see, and I used to do when I was new, is make everything just an even line. With some paint in the brush, I can create my reflection here, and you can really see the difference, right? Especially when you put the reflection in, to see that change in distance there. So with my clean dry brush, I give it a quick sideways. There we go. Now what are we going to do? Let's come back here with our highlight brush, and let's see, I might need to make a little more here. That liquid white, just a drop or two, allows us to create a thinner mix, and you know our golden rule, a thin paint sticks to a thicker paint. Don't want too much or everything starts to turn a little sloppy, a little muddy. You get plenty of paint on the brush. If you're having a hard time getting it to come off, give it a little push. Get some right up there on the tips. Now I'll come back starting at the top, highlight these trees. Not highlighting too much here, looking for these spots here that you think are catching the light. And because this tree I think is in front, that's the one I do. Let it come over the other tree. Now, this tree here in the back, we don't have to do too much of that either. Just bring it on down and just sort of let it disappear. Now, I gotta go back to my 1-inch brush. Cleaning off that 1-inch brush I used for the clouds. We are going to go a little crazy here. A little bit of that liquid white. And I'm going to pull with the tips of the bristles. I'm not going to like scoop or shovel it as I pull. I want to try to keep that paint right on the tips of the bristles. Pulling some of that through. Getting that nice texture here. I'll see if I can't show you that. You got a nice texture, a lot of paint up on the brush, but we want that rounded corner up on top. And that way I can just lightly touch and give this bush different sections here. Reload as many times as you need to get that nice bright color. As soon as it starts dulling and disappearing, you just reload and we do a new section. There we go. Let's change things up a little. One way to help see the differences and different layers here is to change the color. So I'm adding a little bit of the bright red here. And let's add a little bush right there. Yeah, nice little orangey, almost peachy looking one right there. But then I can change things and just go right on back into the yellows and greens just by changing the color here. Making sure I get plenty up here in my brush. And push. Give it a little push. Start to get that lacy effect going. Okay, before I do too much else, I need some more yellow. I think next to the white, the yellow is the color I use the most of here. When I'm highlighting all those bushes, you do need to have plenty of paint. So, a little more of that liquid white. Let's start pulling some of that yellow down. Lots of color here. Change the flavor with some sap green. Look at that, lots of paint in the brush. And boom, boom, boom. Plenty of color, plenty of color. Leaving a little dark as our separator between our layers. Maybe another one right there. Good. Now, I believe Bob came back here with his fan brush and a little bit of that grassy color here. I know it's bushes, but it's also kind of grassy. And I'm going to tap this a little bit underneath these bushes. Make it look like the grass is growing right down to the water's edge. At least get it started. Let's take a little bit of that Van Dyke brown and using the flat of the knife here, just a little roll of paint, I'm going to pull some dirt towards the water. Pull some dirt. Makes it look a little bit open now. It looks like a little beach before the water begins. Now using a touch of white and the brown, maybe just a little touch of the red. You find the flavor that works for you here. We're looking for a highlight color. There we go. Now just like snow on the mountain, I'm going to just graze that highlight over the dirt. Maybe a little lighter. It's not light enough, just reload, make a new color, reload, and drop it on there. Nice. A little bit of the titanium white with just a speck. Remember, just a speck of that liquid white, just to help it flow a little easier here. I'm going to get a roll of paint this time. Not just put it on the edge for my waterline back there, but a little roll of paint. And let's keep this level, pushing, creating a little smear, and then a little bead of color. Still basically sideways. Do want that to look flat here. You could also use the small knife here, if you happen to have one. If you don't, with your master kit, the large knife from the master kit is just plenty. Plenty enough to do the job. There we go. Put another little water line starting here. Now I'll come back with that fan brush. Maybe a couple of spots here. We put a little grass covering the edge of that earth, where the earth begins. Just helps sink it into the scene a little bit. Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Looks like I still have plenty of this color left. But let's go ahead and add the rest of our black, a bit of brown, touch of green, just to give ourselves a little more volume of color here. So we got one big old monster evergreen to make. And it starts right about here and it's way up there. Tapping down. Make a little indication of a tree. Start building. Leave a little bit. Don't go too wide too soon. Leave a little bit of room for growth, I was trying to say. You go too wide too fast, Next thing you know, your tree is taking over the bottom half of your picture. Almost fell into that trap here. Went a little wide, little quick. And if it's looking a little weird, you can always come back and make the top a little wider if you need to. Usually it's the bottom here that needs to be a little wider, so we'll play around with that. A couple extra strokes here, just add some extra body to this tree. But too much messing around and things start to go a little sideways, so I'm going to stop right about there. Not mess with that tree too much more than that. Now, Bob did take a little bit of his sort of a highlight color of the land there, and little indication of a trunk here and there. And I think here with just the last little bit of color, I might need to make a little more color here. He came back and he made a, ooh gosh, I'm gonna have to really tap on things here, folks, so putting the palette down and let's make a big old leafy tree. This is just some dark color. You can just push and mash it on. There we go. We got some dark stuff now. Mash it. Just putting some dark stuff on there. All right. Got some paint on my hand from holding it. All right. Well, it does appear I am nearly out of color, and I do need a little more. That's okay. I think I timed that pretty well, or portioned it pretty well, for the most part. For the most part. So I'm just going to get a little bit of my colors here, mostly black, some crimson, a little bit of blue, touch more green. See, there's, planned it out as much as I can to not have a bunch of excess color left over, and then at the last minute you got to make some more, and I think I'm going to have a lot of excess color. That's okay. It'll get used. So let's make this a little darker. Punch it in there. There's no substitute for just bending those bristles. Creates 1,000 leaves with every hit. Bam, bam, bam. Look at that. Just by pushing upwards, create a whole new effect. And we'll have a little coming out there, another one coming out there. It just comes right on down. Something like that. I think I did a pretty good job of hiding that black blob. What do you think? All right, before I do too much else here, let's create our highlight for our big old evergreen. Looks like I will need just a touch of the sap green. All right, let's come up here and just touch with the corner. Let this work. Don't fight it. Just making a series of frowns. That's all it is here. Let there be dark remaining. It's okay. There we go. Now, we've got ourselves a big old tree here, so we're going to just take this a step at a time. Reloading the brush, putting in a new section of highlights at a time. Don't try to do too much. You start to run out of paint, and then your brush picks up some of those darks, you know? So, I don't know, I sometimes think of these almost like little shelves of highlights, you know? You're working your way, putting in a little section, kind of linear. Sometimes Bob will stop and make a hole, almost like a bush, you know, a rounded shape in the tree. It's really up to you, whatever kind of, wherever your arm takes you. You can look at the shadows that you put in as kind of a guide. It'll show you these little sections of your tree. Little branches, little foliage arms. And you just find them. I'm going to take a little bit of red and just dull things down a little bit. A little bit of red, a little bit of green. Dulls everything. A little bit of my dark color to bring things down a notch here. And as that's working its way down deep into shadows, it doesn't have to be as bright. See that? Another couple, just a little bit here and there. A little push. Now working my way back up to these brighter bushes, a little more in the extreme foreground here, I'm going to change it up again. Go back and make my color a little brighter. In this case, just a little more to the yellow. And look at that, we can create a new entity here, its own little thing. And we got a little round one here, so this one just kind of goes around, has a different shape to it. Gonna go right into this red. Let's dull things down and just give this a whole different look. It's sort of a rusted orange color. Burnt orange, right? And back into a brighter color. Something like that. If you want to put in another layer, you just build one in front of it. There we go. So I'm going to take my dark color here. What dark color am I talking about? A little bit of that Van Dyke brown, and we just pull sideways. This is right off the bat your first painting here. Really, hopefully, helps to teach you about perspective. If I'm pulling that knife horizontal, it's going to create a horizontal look to this path. And what I did so often in my painting journey, at the start of it anyway, is I just pulled down this way and tried to create it. It just looked like it was on an incline, and I didn't really like the look. I wanted it to look flat, like Bob did. So you'll learn. As you're doing this, you practice and you realize, oh, I know what I did last time, and let's change that up so I don't do it again this time. And let's make the path a little bit wider at the bottom than it is at the top. That will always help. Okay. There we go. Now, I got a little something going on there. Something I didn't like. That's all right. You can come right back and drop in a little bush there and here. Cover up whatever you don't like about your path. There it is. And then you clean up the bottom here with your knife just to make that path lay in again. There we go. Because I do need to highlight this path. A little bit of that same highlight color I created, brown and white. Now if you do have other colors from the basic kit or the other colors that aren't in the master kit, you can break those out. A little dark sienna in your highlight color looks really nice. But this is just like laying the snow on the mountain. So light. Just let that shadow color pull off its own highlight. It'll do it. Those high points of the brown will highlight itself. I like it. You can go over this a number of times, but eventually you're going to run out of dark. You know, we want the dark and the light. Coming back here, got a little bit of this color left. Got to come in here and just going to mash this in and get some dark color in the foreground here. And the idea is give it a little bit of an overlap. And it just pushes that path back. Pushes it down into the scene. And look at this texture that this brush is creating. When this dries, you're going to scratch yourself. You run your hands over it. Get some of that dark color right in the foreground. Look at that. We're building. We're definitely building things. Once again, I'm adding a little more white to my brush here. And sometimes you got to stop and clean out your 1-inch brush and go right back into that bright color again. Change the color. Excuse me. Let's get some green in there. There we go. Nice bright one here. And let's start adding some bushes here in the foreground. If it's not sticking easily for you, just another drop or so of the liquid white makes this oh so easy to stick. Pushing lightest possible touch here. This paint is very thin. It should come off with a very light touch, and that gives you those nice frosty looking, lacy looking effects. Very, very light touch. And I like to change the colors halfway through, you know, or anytime you want a little variation here, just change it up. Add a little more green to it. Come back, add some yellows. If you got any of the other colors in the Bob Ross line, the yellow, Indian yellow, yellow ochre. You can really spruce things up a little bit. There we go. Overlap that path and look at that. Things just start happening. Now what's the other brush that comes in the kit we haven't even touched yet? It's the liner brush. So I'm taking my liner brush, a little paint thinner, Van Dyke brown here, and we're going to create a couple little stick or twig kind of jumping up over there. Light little touch, a couple of arms coming off there. Anywhere you like, you can create some extra sticks and twigs here, maybe over on this side here, along the riverbank, in between your bushes here, a couple of sticks and twiggers, little twiggies. All sorts of things going on in here. Even maybe a couple little white ones. Just need the paint very thin. So it flows right off the brush. There we go. Ooh, there it is. This one here, kind of bugging me. Can't go over it too many times or I'll lose it. It'll get too thin. Definitely don't want it too loaded with paint thinner. And I think with that being said, I think we've got ourselves a finished painting. Give it a quick little signature there. One of the last times, or the last time, I do a 2 and a 4. So, I know I promised here. Here was the example that came in the Bob Ross Master Kits back in the day. Nice little scene. Ta-da! And here is my very first one. I tell you, right there in 2015. Number 1, 2015. And we just get better. The more you do it, proof right there. So, I hope you guys had a fun time watching this. I'll see you again in 2025. Take care, everyone.